welcome to this very wet and windy day here at the Last Gallery studio. I thought it would be very appropriate to paint a rainy image in the rain. Even though we're dry in here, it still feels like we're being absolutely poured upon. So I've got this picture here that was taken by a friend of mine of a street scene with lots of umbrellas. And I just thought it's so lovely, such a lovely image. Quite easy to paint because there's no faces, however there are a lot of umbrellas. If you're a bit overwhelmed by the amount of umbrellas, then just minimise the amount, maybe do 2 or 3. You can always put them on a street more locally if you wanted to. You could find a picture from Carmarthen, for example, and put the people in that street. This is in the city somewhere. We'll talk about colour mixing, but first of all I'll talk you through how to draw a figure with an umbrella and how to draw an umbrella structurally correct. So that'll be the next stage, and then we will move on to painting it, and it will be in watercolour. And I've drafted an A3 version here. I don't know if you can see that. It's very pale, and it's in pale pencil, so that I can be assured that when I put the watercolour on it, I won't be able to see the pencil lines through. So when you do your drawing, when you've got your finished drawing and you've transferred it onto your watercolour paper, the best thing to do is just lightly rub it out with a putty rubber, and that will make sure that if you've got any sort of very pale colours, that the lead won't show through. Alright, always be aware of that. The other option is to mask out the figures so that you can paint around them. I'm going to paint around them very loosely with some shades of grey, but if you're worried about the grey going into your figures and your umbrellas, then just mask them out with some masking fluid. It makes it a lot easier. You don't have to do it A3, you can do it A4, you can do it even smaller if you wanted to. Alright, I've sent you a picture of the drawing. The drawing is very pale, so it may or may not print, but have a go. Otherwise you can just take a drawing from the original image. Okay, alright, so see you at the next stage, which is the drawing practice.
Okay, so how do we start to even begin to draw these figures? So if we think just really simply of a figure, so referring back to the structure that we made to do with the horses, think of it in shapes, right? So you've got a head, and then obviously if the body is standing, then you've got a straight line coming down, neck, shoulders, and then you've got 7 heads, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down, right? So there's 7 heads, including the head. That's a normal sized adult. But in these circumstances, we've got a variety of figures, one of which has got a coat on with a bag, others that you just seen from the side. So I'm just going to show you how to do a very simple figure. So you basically have like a rectangle, and you have another rectangle or square where the hips are, and then you have legs, and along those legs you have knees, ankles, feet. Same with the horse, wrist, elbow, wrist, elbow, wrist. Okay, so it's a basic stick figure. So if you follow those principles with all of these figures, then you can sort of lay out. So this figure here with the orange coat on would start with the head. She's slightly on an angle, so she's got a neck slightly on an angle, right? Her shoulders, and then she's got one arm coming down there. The other arm you can't see. You've got your triangle, you've got your hips, and then you've got your legs. Okay, so in there you've got the hood like that. You can't see her neck because it's covered with the coat. The arm comes down here and it's bent the arm, so we're only seeing that much. And we see a little bit of the other arm, and then the rest is basically coat. Yeah? Okay. So do the figures like that. If you're doing a figure on the side, all you do is you squish the oval so it's narrower, and you put a circle. So that's the back of the skull, and then the neck comes down out of it. So that's the front of the face, that's the back of the skull. We'll draw this little green figure here. Her head is tilting down, but we'll look at that. So you've got your rectangle, your hips, and then your legs. Okay, so again, she's got a sort of fluffy collar on, and then the side of her, which includes an arm coming down, but we've blocked off by the umbrella. But if we were to see the whole of her, then her coat comes down to about there, and then her legs come out and into those boots like that. Okay, so that's a side view, and then all the other figures are a repetition of that. So one of the things I like to do is draw. I've drawn onto this so I can see the structure a bit more, but if you draw onto, you know, you've got your shoulders, you've got your rectangle, you've got your square for the hips, you've got your legs, knees, and so on. You can actually sort of pretty much work out the structure of something by drawing onto the image itself. Okay, fortunately we don't have any faces. The only face is this one, and she's looking down, so you've got your oval. So for looking down, rather than doing it vertical like this, you do it like that on an angle, and you put the circle in, so she looks like she's looking down then. Yeah. Neck. She's completely on the side, so we see her arms, her shoulders are there, and so on. Okay, I hope that helps. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But if you can think of it, of all your figures in stick form, then that would be good. So umbrellas now. So I'm just going to turn this over. So umbrellas are basically a sort of a curve and a straight. So you've got that shape, it's almost like an orange segment. Yeah. And then you've got your sections. So there'll always be a middle point. So that's the top of the umbrella. And then you have sections coming off the umbrella. And depending on what you're looking at will depend on how many sections you can see. So once you've drawn your sections in, if you then do a slight curve like this on each one and angle it as it's going away, and imagine that your umbrella stick is coming down there, the handle. Okay. And then it's just about angling it accordingly. So this, for example, is the only one that's slightly different in that you can see most of the umbrella. So the center point is actually here. And then you've got curve. You look at your drawing while you're doing it. And there we go. And then all you do is, oh, there's another one there that I missed, is put your curves in. You can't see these ones because it turns into an oval, and in fact it actually goes slightly convex there. And that would be at that angle, so whoever's carrying it is carrying it at that angle. Okay, have a go. Again, practice, but just think about that sort of orange segment shape. And then you can add your detail. All right, hope that helps. Okay, so I have A3 sheet of watercolour paper, masked off around the outside with masking tape, and then the drawing on the paper. Okay, so what we're going to do first is just undercoat slightly the pavement and the road, and a little bit of work up here. Okay, so what I've got is a set of watercolours, some water, and I've got a series of different shaped brushes. They're all round brushes, but they're different sizes. They're all watercolour brushes. You can tell that by the fact that they're brown and they're short handled. This is a rigger brush, which is a long thin brush. I'll use that to do fine lines. This is a Chinese brush, a wash brush. You can use a normal wash brush if you have one. It just allows you to put a lot of paint on at one time. As you can hear, the rain is still absolutely beating it down, and we've got a lot of wind at the moment as well. Okay, so what I'm going to use is just the sort of dirty bits on my palette. I've got some purple here. It's purple mixed with a bit of Payne's grey, and it's a good colour for a wet sort of paved surface or a wet road. You can put a little bit of red into it if you want to, but we're just going to put a very loose sort of undercoat in around these people. I'm just going to do it really loosely. I'm not actually going to paint it all in solidly, because I want it to have a loose feeling. Now, you could do this wet on, wet in, what they call wet in wet, which is where you put the water onto the paper first, and then you add the colour into it. So if you're confident with that technique, then you can do that. This technique that I'm using here is called wet on dry. So I'm putting wet colour onto the dry surface. Okay. Make sure you've got enough of the colour mixed up and that you can get into these little sort of gaps with your brush quite quickly. But like I said, I'm going to go in really loose and not worry too much about it being sort of totally accurate to the surface that I'm painting. I want this to be loose. There's no reason why you couldn't add different colours in here if you fancied it. So if you thought, oh, a little bit of blue there would be nice, then put it in, you know. Watch where you're painting and make sure that you're not going into areas that you shouldn't be going into with colour. I'm just going to take that out there. There's a man in a black jacket just there, and then we're into this section here. It might be that you accidentally go into areas that either don't need paint on them or do need paint on them, but because we're dealing with quite a light colour here, it doesn't really matter. Like I just painted over her legs there, but her legs are going to be sort of, I don't know, a dark brown colour, so I'll be able to paint over that. Okay, so loose strokes. You don't need to cover everything up. You can go back in. The gaps, they're fine, you know, just loose. And the road, so it separates a bit from the road, I'm just going to add a little bit of red into that purple tone, and I'm just going to put that on the road area like this. Again, not making too much of it. I don't want to worry too much about getting it filled in. Now if you want to fill it in and take your time with this, then go ahead. You know, you can spend an afternoon painting round all these little umbrellas. I just painted onto her face. I'm just going to pull that off with my, yeah, if you paint on something accidentally, then you can just pull it off with a bit of with your finger or a bit of paper towel, or like for example that's a white scarf that I'm painting round now. So you know, if you've accidentally put some colour there where it's not supposed to be, then you can just spread it out a bit. Again, over the other side there is a bit of pavement, so again just a very quick mark. I'm just going to take a little bit of the weight off here with a brush. Bring a touch of this colour in down there. Okay, now up the top we don't need to worry too much about this area. Actually no, I will put a little bit of yellow ochre. You should have that in your watercolour sets. I'm putting it into the same colour as I used on the road. We're just yellowing it up a little. You just want a slight tonal difference there, like that. Don't let it pool if you can. Same with the building over the other side, this one here. But again, we don't want to go into too much detail with these buildings because we want the focus to be on our umbrellas. Alright, that building there is white, and again we can just put a little suggestion of colour on these buildings here. And we can do more of that later on. I don't know what that mark is there, but hopefully it'll cover. So we put a bit of blue in the sky, I think. Bit of blue coming down. If you get bits on your watercolour, don't worry, just leave them. It's better to leave them than to pick at them. I'm going to put a little bit of grey in there because it's supposed to be rainy. So I'm just going to put a bit of grey, and we can go back and work into that later on. Alright, so now you've got your loose colour down for the background, you can start to work on your figures. However, before we do that, I'm just going to lightly dry this off. I'm just going to turn the lights on because it's got a bit dark. Not that it will make a huge amount of difference, but it might make a bit of a difference. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by painting the umbrella in the foreground. Now, the other option for these umbrellas is to make them different colours than what they are. So this lady's coat is orange and she's got a spotty umbrella. I don't want to do spots. I mean, you can make them different colours if you wanted to, the spots different colours, blah blah blah, but I'm going to change the colour of the umbrella. So I'm going to make it, I think I might do it a purple tone, mainly because the purple is complementary to the orange, which her coat will be orange. So I'm just going to start to paint this in. I may put some spots on, but I may not. I'll see.
but I want to make this umbrella stand out a bit more than it's currently doing. So I'm just taking purple. If you haven't got purple, you can mix ultramarine and alizarin crimson together and you'll get a purple. You won't get a rich purple like this one, but you'll get a purple, a nice purple. Alright, so just keep adding to this, and we're working wet on dry here, and I'm using a small brush. The reason why I'm using a small brush is so that I can be accurate with my lines, because I want them to be nice and crisp, and the only way you can do that is by using the right size brush and also using nice fluid colour. That means putting plenty of water and plenty of pigment into your mix. So I'm just using, like I said, I'm just using a purple. You can decide to use a different colour if you want to use a red, for example, something like that. Make sure you get nice points on these umbrellas. If you've done your drawing nicely, then you shouldn't have any issues with painting these brollies. Okay, so just to refresh, if you haven't got purple, alizarin crimson and ultramarine. So to get a little bit of shape onto this umbrella, we're going to use a second coat. Now, it kind of helps to have this dry it off a bit, but you can go in with another layer of colour and just add extra layers. So I'm just following the curve of where the wire is on the umbrella, and that one comes to there, so like that. Can you see? And those extra, just an extra layer of paint will give you the suggestion of the bend in the umbrella. Can you see how that's working? So all the way along and then down. Okay, you can bleed it in while it's wet, or you can do it when it's dry. It's up to you. There's also some flashes of this will be where the umbrella is sort of, the fabric is loose on, oops, that's probably a bit much, but never mind. So just add extra blobs on top of your umbrella. Okay, and that'll do for now. Okay, follow the same routine with the rest of the picture. So I'm going to do an orange coat on this woman because it's beautiful and strong, and it makes her project forward and away from the rest of the picture. So orange, don't worry about the handbag for now, because we're going to actually, well, the handbag is dark, isn't it? So it doesn't really matter. You can paint round it, but if you get a little bit of pigment on the bag, it doesn't really matter. Just paint her in. like this, and then if there's any folds or details on her, then you need to put them in. So extra bits of colour, just add them in. Stronger on the base of the sleeve. And then if you take a bit of orange and mix in a bit of Payne's grey or brown or whatever, then you can also add these little shadows in down here. But it's a bit wet, so I'm going to wait for that to dry a little. I'm just going to put a little bit there, and you can see how it works. Alright, but it's a little bit wet. So I'll continue with the orange, and I'll go into the middle of the bag. Again, make sure you have the right size brush to get in these little tiny areas, because otherwise you won't get those details. Down into the curve of the bag and then fill. Okay, we'll do a hood. I've made sure that the purple above is dry before I've put any colour on here. Just be aware of that, otherwise the orange will run into the purple and create a muddy colour, which none of us want. Okay, so once you've got to that stage, you'll find that the arm is a little bit drier. So we can go back into that sort of burnt orange colour, which we used using orange and a little bit of Payne's grey or brown. If you haven't got orange, you need to use cadmium yellow and cadmium red, and that will give you an orange. So into these little areas of, this might still be a bit wet actually, still very wet, but you can see how that is going to add to the darkness of that area there. And it's a little bit darker in the bottom of here, so I'm going to put a little bit of brown there, and it's also a bit darker on the side of that, the hood, so you can add a little bit of darkness there. Okay, so that is all you have to do basically with the whole picture, is just to block it in, wet on dry, go slowly. If you get bored, or if your hands get a bit sore or whatever, then have a break and come back to it. It is only blocking in for the moment, and I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it on fast so that you can see it building up quickly. The colours I'm going to use are orange. I'm going to use a series of purples because purple is complementary to orange. And then we've got, on this woman here, we've got a variety of blacks, so you can either use black or Payne's grey. We've got a bit of red here, just use a cadmium red or an alizarin crimson. There's a bit of green here, you could use a sap green, just very thin. Brown, burnt umber, blacks, a little bit of blue up there. If you want to minimise your colour mixing, then stick to 2 or 3 different colours and see how you go. See how it starts looking, and then you can sort of add in more colours. It really depends on how colourful you want this image to be. Alright, so like I said, I'll put it on fast film now so you can see it building up. But all I'm doing is repeating this exercise here, which is putting the main colour down. Oh, I can show you another thing just while I'm here. So a wet brush, not really wet, just wipe it off a little bit, and you can, when you've finished an area and if there is a highlight, then you can go in and you can lift off a bit of colour. So this is just a semi-wet brush. Every time you do a brush, wash it off and just wipe it off with a bit of paper towel or something like that and just lift. Can you see how that works? I'm just going to do a little bit of a highlight on his shoulder. Just all you're doing is you're lifting off a bit of the pigment, but the brush mustn't be too wet because it'll form cauliflowers, and this is a cauliflower. Okay, so a semi-dry brush, and every time you do a few brush marks, just wash it off because the pigment will be on the brush and all you'll be doing is rubbing it in. Wash it off, dry it off a little bit with a paper towel, and then just lift off a little bit of the pigment. Can you see how that works? We'll do another one here. And again, you can do as much or as little of that as you want, really. Okay, hopefully that's all you'll need for now, and I'll put it on fast now. Right, I just want to show you again the technique of removal and addition of paint in the same way that I did on the orange coat here, just in case you need to be shown again. So I've finished this, I've blocked her in, and I've realised that I need to put a highlight on the back of her legs. So all I've got is some very clean water and a small brush, and I've dipped my brush into the water, and then I'm just going to dab it off slightly on you can do it on a paper towel or a piece of cloth, and I'm just going to run that water, so it's a damp brush rather than a dripping brush. I'm just going to run it down. Now this is already dry, so if you want to do it while it's wet, you can. And then you just literally just press with a paper towel or with some kind of cloth, paper towel, toilet tissue, whatever. You can do it repeatedly until you get the finish that you want. Okay, so there we have a highlight down the back side of that leg. I'm going to do another one on the other side. So I'm not removing it down to the white paper. I just want to take a single layer of paint off. Okay, so this is the wet on dry technique of removing. Now don't rub. You must just clean section and then just press, and you'll see that it comes off on your paper towel. I recommend that you use a paper towel rather than a piece of cloth. It's easier because it's more absorbent, but you can see that the paint is slowly removing there, and the more you do it, the better, or the more of a highlight you'll get. So you can just sort of put some folds in, just keep wiping your brush off so that onto your cloth or paper towel, so that you don't have any pigment on your brush. Can you see how that's working now? Okay, now we've got a similar sort of mark along the bottom of her coat as well. So again, I'm just going to put the water down
like that. I'm going to wait for it for a little while to absorb. Just let it absorb into the paper, because this is now dry paint you're working on. Okay, and then you can press again, just single press, don't rub, and you just start seeing that the paint lifts off. Okay, try again on the back of the shoulder. You'll find that this is a really good technique for making highlights on most things. So you're literally just wetting. It's different to the technique that I showed you earlier, because all you're doing when it's wet, when you initially put the colour on, all you're doing is lifting the wet paint off the surface. But if you've left something to dry, or if you've not worked quickly enough, then this is the way to do it. Okay, you can just see that lightening up now. Press it again with your paper towel and just keep repeating that until you're happy. Now, the other thing to do is to take some, I used on this figure, some Payne's Grey. Payne's Grey or black will do. And just add another layer to the darker sections of her trousers. Now you can follow the folds accurately if you want to. It really depends on how fussy you are as an artist as to how close to the original picture you want to stick. So that's up to you. Oops. There's a little bump there, and then it comes down into a foot. And then it forms a sort of curve, doesn't it? It goes in and then it comes out again. All right. Same on the other leg. Now the other leg doesn't have as much shadow on it, but I'm just going to put a slight suggestion. And what this does is it describes the back of this leg as well as describing the folds in her right leg trousers. So it's doing two jobs. So again, careful observation of those shapes. Same with the coat. You can see that underneath this area here, it's darker. So you can darken that up underneath her arms. So this mark here will not only allow the bag to stand out a little bit more, but also will describe the way her arm is folding into that jacket. So two jobs again in one. There's another fold just up here as well. So you can carry on applying and removing paint until you're happy. It's like I said, it's just the same technique throughout the painting. And what I'll do is I'll just do a little bit more. You can use smaller brushes for finer detail. Don't be frightened of doing that. Don't be frightened of adding more colour if you need it, or thinner colour, as I'm going to do now. So I've got that's quite dark, and I'm just going to add a touch of water to knock it back a bit around the edges, like that. There is a highlight there, so I'll leave that in. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit more and put some marks in there. So you can see that bag coming out, and the person. Actually, you couldn't see what I did with her legs. Sorry about that. Oh dear, never mind. So you can see where I've removed the back of the leg, the highlights on the back of the leg. Sorry about that. And then put in the darker tones there. All right. So like I said, just keep building up. There's already a dark mark there, so it's not necessary to put any more in. But we do have a shoulder strap coming down to sort of this section of the bag there. So there needs to be some description of what's going on in that area, like that. There's a light coloured buckle coming off there, so I'd have to work out how I'm going to include that. I might have to lift off a little bit of paint to get that in. There's some lighter marks, so as your paint runs off on your brush, you can sort of apply lighter, that's as in lighter black marks, to the rest of her coat. There's a mark coming down there. There's a lot more detail in that arm than I've done here, so I'm just going to put in some more creases. So again, you know, how much time do you want to spend on this painting? You decide. And you know, you could do sort of a semi-abstract version of her. If you don't want to spend too much time on it, or you can spend a lot of time and really work into this detail. And especially because I'm using A3 sized paper here, you know, you could really go to town and add lots and lots of detail. And the nice thing about watercolour is that you can add detail slowly. So you can do a bit, go away, come back. Let's do her shoes. You know, I did some of this yesterday and now I'm finishing it this morning. So, you know, take your time and enjoy it. And it's such a lovely painting that it's worth spending the time on. But like I said, if you've not got hours and hours and hours to paint, then just minimise the detail that you're putting in. Or work smaller, work on A4. That's the other option. Right, she's got light brown hair, but there is a shadow coming down from the umbrella onto her hair. So put that in, put some sort of movement into these brush marks, make them sort of curly so that it's not just one flat mark. And then we're up into the umbrella and we've got a mark here. I haven't included the stripe because I didn't want the stripe, but again, it's up to you whether you do that or not. But we do have a darker section sort of here. There's a slight highlight, so I'm going to fill that in a little bit with a bit more black or Payne's grey, whatever you want to do. And I'm going to leave that stripe down the bottom, but it's going to be a grey stripe rather than a golden stripe. And then the bit that's over there there's another section just showing over the other side, and then there's another section here that comes down like that, but it's not as dark as this one, so we'll just put in a little bit of shading like that. Now here we have an example of a hard edge, right? So this is a hard edge. So that's, you've got your wet in wet paint there, and you've put a wet on dry paint mark over the top. So if you don't want it to be that pronounced, just take a semi-dry brush. Again, just wipe it off on a piece of paper towel or a cloth, and then just sort of smooth it. It must be semi-dry, it mustn't be dripping, because if it's dripping wet, it will cause cauliflowers. But you just smooth the edges like that, blend it in, and then it will just merge with what's going on underneath. Okay, and again, you can do as much or as little of that as you want. Again, I'm just going to pick up the thick dark paint and I'm just going to put an edge coming down here in dark, oops, just so that we have a feeling of it going away from us. And I'm going to put a little bit more of the black under here. And again, I'm just going to curl it into her hair like that. Okay, so it goes, it's graduated the colour going from light, and again you can just sort of put a semi-damp brush on and just sort of blend it together if you don't like the hard lines. Okay, so carry on like that, complete the rest of the figures, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to deal with the rest of the buildings on the floor and shadows and things like that. All right, I'm going to put it on time lapse again so you can see me finishing the rest of the painting. Okay, just switch my fan off. I have just done this area of paper. I've nearly finished the figures, not quite. I'm going to go back and assess them once I've done the background and the ground. So I've just done this bit here just to try out the paints, and I've used cobalt blue or cerulean blue and some form of dark brown, so burnt umber or something like that. And I've used similar colours to start blocking in the buildings up here. Okay, so the buildings are just really a matter of blocking in, like I said, but the road surface and the pavement are a different matter. So we're going to deal with them in sections. So I did this section first, which is quite useful actually. We've got little sections that we can work with rather than having to do the whole thing. So what you need to do is just take a large brush, a mop brush or a Chinese brush like I've got here, and wet the area. Oh, before you do that, prepare, let me get rid of that, just a sec. Prepare your cobalt blue and some brown and wet it down quite thin. Okay, so like I said, just take some water and block out the area. Now be careful, we're going to work around these figures if we can, and you need to get it quite wet. You can see my brush is a bit dirty, but I'm not bothered about that because the ground itself is sort of a browny tone. So I'm just going to put a little patch in there, and then we're going to do up here, all the way up there. If there's anything that you can see that's a pavement through these figures, then you need to put water there. Now if you look at the image, you can see there are areas where there seems to be blue, like that. So I'm going to paint the blue in, coming off of this lady's top of her boots, more or less, all the way across there, and you can see it's gonna bleed into that water, which is what we want. We don't want a hard edge for this bit of the painting. We want it to be nice and blurry. So I'm just going to put that all over that corner. Not too strong. And it comes down sort of there, where, away from her jacket. And then up in here is blue. And I'm going to put a flash here. and a little bit here, and a little bit up here, but I don't think we can see much of that. Okay, and then before it dries out, you want to take up the brown colour that you've got. So whatever that is, I've got a little bit of burnt umber mixed with a bit of burnt sienna, but it just needs to be a browny tone really, and you put that pretty much everywhere else in here. Don't worry if it sort of starts to come down here, because it's just going to create shadows. Okay, so that's that bit. Don't go near the road, but you just do the road the same. You wet it and then you apply colour. Around here there's a little reflection of pale blue. I think it might be coming off of this building. Along the top of the road there's a bit of pale blue, but the rest of it is like a pinky colour, and then the path over here you just treat in this way. Now, I was just chatting there because I want to wait for this to dry off a touch, and as it dries off, if you feel like you need stronger blue in places, you can put bits of stronger blue. So you can take a smaller brush and just sort of add. Now the other thing is you might be able to see a bit of purple. Oops, it's a bit strong though. I'll just pick that up out straight off my pan, and it's too strong. I didn't water it down, so there's a bit of purple there. Not too much. It just adds to the interest. And then as we go over, we've got sort of a grey browny colour, and this is describing the shadows that are coming off these people. So like here, here, here. So under her arm. Now you need your work to be drying off to do this. You don't want this bit to spread too much. So make sure that you've waited a few seconds and just put in a touch of the colour and see how far it moves. It's not moving too far, so I'm happy. So I'm just going to fill that shape in now. You'll still have your soft edges, so you don't need to worry because the paper is wet. Okay, and there's no reason why you can't drag a few marks across, but we're not going to paint the paving slabs. The reason being is because if you don't get them spot on, they look really weird. So artistic license gives us the opportunity to ignore the paving slabs. It's a blessing, I tell you. So up here we've got a bit of a crisper shadow coming off here, but what I want to do is just put it in first, blurry, and then we'll start to add extra bits here and there. So again, I think there's a shadow, looks like it's coming off. I don't know what that's coming off, but it's coming off something, coming down there like that. Now, always with things like this, less is more. So put some down, leave it to dry, and then work on top of it if you need to. So, for example, here, where this lady is standing, it's much darker. I need the shadow to be stronger. So I'm going to pick up another layer of that brown mix. Can you still see her? Yes, you can. Right, so we're going to work into this now. Now this is dry, so I wanted to wait until it was dry before I started putting in these stronger shadows. Now you might find that that's a bit brown, but I'm just going to put it down just to... The rain is coming down again. Right, so I'm going to drag off this shadow and lighten it up by just adding water. So can you see, just like that. So you just want a suggestion of shadow. You don't want it to be too strong, you know. that bit there is incorrect. Just put that. I'm going to put a little touch coming off of this lady here, just down the right hand side of her leg, mainly because that's happening here, so it should be happening here even though you can't see it on the picture. That area there I'm going to wait until it's dry. This area here, I'm just going to pick up a bit of grey. I'm just going to put a shadow in here, like that. So it's just, we're just literally putting on, oh yes, very strong now, some detail, but not too much. The tendency is to paint all of the detail in, and we don't want that. We want a nice, simple representation of what we're seeing. And as you go away, obviously, that detail becomes less so. So simplify it, thin it down, and don't make so much of it. We want the detail to be in the foreground. So can you see how that works now? I'm going to put a little bit of extra blue just coming down here like this. I'm just going to spread it like this. There we go. Okay. So you can basically, I'm going to have to stop this in a minute because it's going too long. Wet in wet, let it dry, then add detail. Okay? Okay, so now we're just coming to finishing touches. As you can see, I've added descriptive lines along the roads, a little bit of detail in the background for the houses, a little bit of detail around here, but not too much. Don't want to distract from the main subject, which are the umbrellas. Okay, if you've lost any whites that you want to restore, the best thing to use is this gouache. Designer gouache is called permanent white. Okay, this will allow you to restore your white colours if you've lost them. So for example, if you're not too happy with the way that you've painted this scarf on this lady here, and you might have gone over it a few times and it's now a little bit brown, then you can take the gouache and you can put the white back in. Now the thing about the gouache is that it is opaque, and it's really useful if you're going to carry on with watercolour particularly. You can see that that has had some impact. So the reason why it stands out on the watercolour is because it is opaque. Okay, this lady here is carrying a carrier bag and I've painted over that, so I'm going to pop that back in. I think she's carrying she's carrying something, so I'm just going to pop that back in under there, and it's white. So what else have we got? This guy's shoulder, even though it's okay, you can just bring a little bit of white back into his coat just by adding this gouache. Same with this here. All right, you can use white watercolour, but it's not strong enough really. The other place that you might want to put it is on things like, so like I said, you can use white watercolour, but it tends to absorb back into the paper, so it doesn't stand out as much. So where we've got buckles on these bags, This one I've completely left out. So there's a little like mark there and a mark there. So you can put those back in. You can put the details on her bag. She's got some sort of metallic marks. They must be clasps or something. Here again, I haven't actually put any colour on these, so maybe I need to put in some bits on there. Alright, so if you want to add some lampposts or whatever and you haven't been able to add them without painting over them, then you can go ahead with that. Alright, so that's designer gouache again. Alright, so here where I've noticed on these rings here, what you would do is put a shadow on one side like that, on the left hand, on the right hand side, and then on the opposite but interior section of that, like that. Okay, and then you get your feeling of 3D. Okay, so I've realised that I haven't painted any of my umbrella handles in. So we've got one coming down here into the hand of this lady here. If you're not steady enough to put these in, then you can always put them in with a pen instead. We can't see the one here, we can't see the one here, we can see this one, and I've realised I've left his head out, so I need to put his head back in. So this one comes down here like that. And it's funny how animated this becomes once you sort of put in the main details. Can we see that one? We can. So the centre is there, so it should come down there. Can't see that one. I'm just going to put a little point on there, little point on there. You can put your points in. That again will give it some character. Okay, so what else have we got? Oh yes, the chap's face. So I just use a little bit of dirty yellow with a bit of red in it for a face colour. So just a touch of yellow with a bit of red. You can see that tone, can't you? So just a little bit of red in it will give you a face tone. So I'm just going to pop him in here. Oh, it needs to be a bit stronger than that. There we go. Okay, so continue with detail as far as you want to detail things. You know, the main character is this orange coated lady. So put most effort into her. So where she's got this line coming down the back of her coat, pop those in. Pop the line that goes around her shoulder, and she's got another one here that comes through the bag like that. Okay, that one actually comes all, there's a curve that comes down there like this, so we can put that in. Just put an extra bit of effort into her because she's the closest to you. The rest of them can sort of stay pretty, you know, simple. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this edging off, and hopefully it'll come off without taking any paper with it. If you just go real slow, and with masking tape, what I tend to do is I tend to just sort of pat it on my clothing before I put it on the paper, and it just removes a little bit of the extra glue, which is what ends up pulling your paper off if you're not careful. But if you go slowly with this rather than whipping at it, then you shouldn't have any trouble. And also you can get what's called low tack masking tape, which eliminates the problem that you have with the masking tape peeling off the paper. You can see there's just a bit come off there. Just go slowly and pull it from there rather than from the end, and you shouldn't have any trouble. And really, you know, it's not hugely important that you put masking tape on your watercolours, but you know, it does provide you with a nice crisp clean finish, and also gives you something to frame up to when you pop it in a frame. You can see where the paper's coming off there. So I'm just gonna take it from this side, see if I can get it off. Can you see that actually? No. There we go. Let me just lift this up a bit higher, you might be able to see it a bit better. Okay, and last bit. So you can see that that makes a nice clean image for you. And if you wanted to frame it off even further, so if you decided that you, for example, let me just get some paper. If you decided that actually you didn't want too much of the distant landscape in your picture, then you could always bring it down a touch like this, you know, clip off some of the edges, etc, etc. All right, so I'm going to carry on just adding bits of detail here. Keep looking at your image. You can add, I mean, I've got the suggestion of some paving here just with the odd line, but I can't stress enough, don't go putting paving slabs in, because it really does cause trouble unless you can get a really accurate mark with regard to perspective. Then, you know, don't go near it. All right. Again, with the details in the background, I would prefer it actually if the details were a little less. And I've painted them in now, but what you can do is you can soften them by just adding some water. So if you just rub over like this with water, then it softens up those marks that you've made just with some water. Just blur it up a bit and stop it from looking a bit harsh, you know, like that. That's better. All right, so simply like that. I will put this on time lapse again, and I'll just finish off details, and then I'll put a final picture up at the end so that you've got something to work on. But it's a lovely picture. It's definitely worth the effort. So have a go, and I hope you enjoy it.